Hello, my friends. Our topic is Chiron. I have a key phrase for Chiron. Sometimes it's nice to have like a short phrase or keyword to lock in to the essential function of a planet or a zodiac sign or whatever it is. And the phrase I'm using here is finding our inspiration. In the past, I've used the phrase electric circuit. An alternative phrase that I've come up with more recently is finding our inspiration. I'm going to explain in more detail why Chiron is an electric circuit, or we can call it finding our inspiration. And what about Chiron, the wounded healer? That's the phrase we hear over and over again. What I'm going to present to you is the idea that what Chiron does is it's a connection. It's like a connective tissue that connects, or a pathway, a road that connects Saturn and Uranus. So it brings the forces of Saturn and Uranus together, and you can express that as finding our inspiration. Inspiration is the Uranus, the spontaneity, the liveliness. The finding is the Saturn. Why is Saturn the finding? Because Saturn means a decision, something essential, something that's so fundamental that you cannot ignore it. If you do ignore it, you're missing the core. We often say Saturn is like the bones of something, the structure behind things. That's true in the sense that Saturn gets to the core, to what's fundamental and essential. So Saturn-Uranus, Chiron's orbit moves between Saturn and Uranus, and that's its meaning, is that it's bringing the inspiration of Uranus to something essential. Well, what does it mean to bring the spontaneity of Uranus to something essential? It ends up being what inspires you. What can you get excited about? What is your place in life? What is the thing that will keep you enthusiastic for the rest of your life? How can you find your way, your road, for what's inspiring to you? So, of course, some people become musicians, some become nurses, some become carpenters. What is it that turns you on? What presses the button that means something to you, that's important? This is what Chiron's about. It's about finding that place where you feel excited. And the excitement of Chiron is externally subtle. It's not obvious. It's not like it's some Uranian thing, like it's wild and erratic. Uranus can be wild and erratic, but Chiron isn't. Chiron brings that excitement of Uranus into a kind of quiet, simple, you could even say humble focus. It's just what's interesting, what's alive for me. So we can think of it as an electric circuit, that vibrancy of Uranus coming through a focus. We can also think of it as what is your inspiration? What can you tie into that you will never tire of, that will keep being important, and it's important for life? Not a Uranian, we're just going to have a wild party and go, uncontrolled. But this is Saturn-Uranus, is what Chiron's doing. It's connecting them. Let's take that and find something that we want to get up every day and do. Wow, I want to work on my next painting. Wow, I want to work in the hospital and treat more patients. Something that means something to you. That's what Chiron is. Finding your inspiration, finding that circuitry that keeps you alive and enthusiastic. Again, not wildly, frenetically enthusiastic, but just alive, just awake, just interested, captivates your attention. You keep learning something new or experiencing something fresh every time you go back to it. And the Saturn part of it is it's your path, your connection, your way to it. That's what Chiron does. Now, we hear that Chiron's the wounded healer. That's the phrase we hear over and over again. Well, I have an alternative term for this wounded part, and I would call it childhood challenges. The childhood challenges that come with Chiron are a symptom or expression, something that comes out of this need to find your inspiration. I'm going to explain this in detail. So what I'm saying, what does Chiron do? Chiron is your path to what's inspiring and alive and meaningful to you. What are some consequences of that process? A lot of tension and difficulty typically in childhood. I'll explain why. This is probably going to take 2 videos. I've got a lot to say about this. And it can lead to a gift of healing. Now, that may not be obvious, but what I'm saying is that some of the things that are commonly said about Chiron, the wounding and the healing, they often do occur according to our latest research. We've done more research on Chiron. They often do happen. They do not necessarily happen. So I'm going to take you through the latest research and how all of this works. Okay, so the first research was done back in 2014. So that was 9 years ago. I'm making this video in, in early July 2023. And that video, which is very important, this video does not supersede the tutorial video I made back in 2014. Everything that's presented there, still true, still very important. We're just going to build on that and add some additional things to it. Nothing we've discovered recently contradicts that. Sometimes we make new discoveries that really modify considerably, maybe even alter what we thought. What we've discovered here is not altering, it's expanding and showing more of the context of what happens with Chiron. So that video I made in 2014 called wasn't called, but it was on the topic of what we call super people, the super Chiron people. We can have a super Jupiter person, super Neptune person, by a super Chiron person. In that research we did in 2014, there were people who have the sun or moon conjunct Chiron with the smallest orb among many thousands of people. If you have a planet conjunct the sun or moon with a 1-minute orb, a 2-minute orb, that planet must be conspicuous in your life in some way. And of those people, no cherry picking, who has Chiron right on their sun or moon, none of them were healers. So that it's just interesting. That's why we do the research. I thought we would find there would be some healers. None among the top people. Does that mean that Chiron never has anything to do with healing? No, it doesn't mean there's no connection. But what it does mean is that healing is not the essential, consistent, most obvious, conspicuous thing about Chiron. In an evidence-based practice, we put tremendous emphasis and we derive great confidence from the ideas that are drawn from the database. And this system of astrology I use, vibrational astrology, is an evidence-based practice, just like psychology, just like medicine and other fields. So none of them are healers, and they all have what we could call quiet charisma. Many of them were performers. They have this magnetic quality about them. People are drawn to them, but they're not flamboyant. They're drawn to them even though there's nothing ostentatious, loud, brilliant about them. They have this internal power, this liveliness that just comes out of them, and they don't even have to express themselves in a really openly way. It just, comes out of them. That's that Saturn-Uranus, that electrical force just focused in. That's what Chiron can do. It can give. That's what Chiron wants to do, we can say. It's this force to bring this alive what's alive and meaningful into you from your heart and becomes your way of life. So themes of being wounded were not conspicuous. We saw a few cases, a few of the people having some serious problems in their childhood and so on. Not consistent. The healing didn't really show up at all. Maybe a little bit of evidence of being wounded. Again, this means that wounding is very likely not the essential thing. And so what we have were many singers, performers. One person was a skater, ice skating. They're not flashy, but they are still charismatic despite not being flashy. However, despite that research, some astrologers who watched that video, studied it, found it meaningful, still finding the theme of wounded healer makes sense with the clients. So how do we reconcile this difference between what we see in the research, saying quiet charisma, versus the astrological work with clients, where this wounded healer theme, it just seems to make sense in actual practice. So how do we resolve this? And this is very important because in an evidence-based practice, we have what we get from the research, and it must work with clients. The quiet charisma does work, but there's other things going on that astrologers have noticed continues to seem to make sense. So we need to see what's going on here. The client work is continuing to say something we didn't see in the database. How do we resolve this? So first, let's see. Here's a first step in seeing how we can resolve that. We can see if our understanding of Chiron as this electric circuit. Let's go back to my phrase here. Finding our inspiration. This phrase, finding our inspiration, was born out of this next phase of research, which I'm going to show you. That this electric circuit, psychologically, in terms of how a person can think of it and experience it, it's finding your inspiration. So we're going to see how Chiron's force to help us, to guide us, to find our inspiration, how could that be connected to the concepts of wounding and healing? And we see that it's actually fairly straightforward how this theme of wounding and healing comes out of the essential process of Chiron. So the essential process of Chiron is it's an electric circuit. It's this inspiration and excitement coming into a focus in our lives. It's how we find our inspiration. And in the process of trying to find our inspiration, a lot of wounding occurs. I'm going to explain how that wounding occurs. And healing power can enter into it. I'm going to show how we've confirmed these things. So Chiron, let's review this again. What does Chiron do? It brings the electrical spontaneity of Uranus into a powerful focus. Saturn strips away to the essence, so the expression is honest, sincere, and has, you could say, no minimal flamboyance and exaggeration. This is how Chiron operates. Chiron is not flashy. It avoids external and superfluous external enhancements. Chiron seeks to dazzle by a deep inner sincerity. We see this with the performers who have this very strong Chiron. They're not flashy. They're not using a lot of clothing, fancy clothing and lights and whatever. They just stand there and people are mesmerized. So now you could have something else in your chart that does make you flamboyant. It's not that Chiron is going to destroy being theatrical. It's just that's not Chiron's interest. So Chiron doesn't destroy that. It's just not interested in it. It just has no appeal. It's like, well, who cares? So Chiron's not anti-theatrical theatrical, anti-flamboyant. It just doesn't care about it. It has no interest in it. Chiron wants to just feel inside themselves that this is what's really exciting. So if you have something else in your chart that makes you flamboyant, that can get added too. But you will always sense the very strong simplicity and sincerity of Chiron. In fact, all of the super Chiron people were not flamboyant. None of them. Simple, direct, powerful charisma. So Chiron, here's another way of thinking of Chiron. Chiron seeks something that makes our heart sing. What makes your heart sing? What are you enthusiastic about day after day after day? It can be an abstract thing like mathematics. It doesn't have, when I say makes your heart sing, it doesn't have to be like poetry and flowers and rainbows. But what makes your heart sing? Something that is stimulating because it is alive, awake, and vibrant. Not because it can make you successful in a material sense. Chiron is about, what am I excited about? It's not practical. It's not thinking about impressing people. It's not thinking about making a lot of money and getting a lot of comfort. It's just thinking, what's exciting to me? What can I wake up in the morning and want to go back to it and see a little bit more? Discover, look at it, experience it, follow some new area, new development within this basic area. And most fields are like that. I mean, if you're a painter, painting goes on forever. Different styles, different kinds of paints. If you're music, whatever you do. What is the thing that continues to captivate you and you want to continue exploring and experiencing and you just feel excited about it? Chiron finds freedom by finding one's own voice. This is another phrase you can use for Chiron. Finding your own voice. Makes your heart sing. Finding your own voice. Finding what's inspiring to you. These are different ways of saying what Chiron does. Brings that electricity into your heart, into your bones. You feel it in your bones. Chiron avoids dry repetition, and it avoids unnecessary embellishments. So Chiron doesn't want to just practice the same thing over and over and over again. It'll practice it as long as it can feel the life and the vibrancy that it will lead to. Chiron does employ any trick or technique that enhances the real purpose and message being delivered. It's not like Chiron won't use some nice colors and enhancements. It will. It will. If it will really help the essential message. Very often we start adorning things and putting a lot of show. It detracts from the essential core message. They'd rather keep it simple, direct, boom, so you're not distracted. But some embellishments can enhance that message. And they will use anything that creates a richer experience, a deeper experience, a more meaningful experience. So although our research that we did in 2014 showed that Chiron inclines to quiet charisma, this need to feel alive, to feel what touches your heart, can also, one, it can give healing ability. Because Chiron is like a current going through a wire. Well, we don't know, we can hypothesize. Our research confirms this, that maybe, just thinking about the logic of it, could the function of Chiron be related to healing? Well, if Chiron is an electric force going through a wire, if it's this excitement that's focused and simple and direct, maybe Chiron could give the ability to heal with your hands. That's a kind of electric force, that's excitement. Maybe these performers, a lot of them were singers. Maybe their music, in a sense, is similar to laying on hands. It excites you. It makes you more alive. You're drawn into the center of their awareness, that they are excited, they're alive with what they're saying, and they draw you into it. Maybe that is even a kind of a healing, like an energizing effect, a breaking of blocks when we get excited by that performer who has that magnetism, that charisma that wakes us up, makes us feel more alive. So in a sense, maybe what we're seeing with this quiet charisma is not so different from the energetic process of someone doing healing with their hands. Maybe it's possible. And so I did research. I'm going to show you the results of research, which suggests that it's true. This is only one possible expression of Chiron, where it's literally healing. That's what it is. Not healing with external things, vitamins, minerals, diet. It's energetic healing. That's the kind of healing we're talking about with Chiron. It's not like, I'm a doctor, I'm a nurse. Are you an energetic healer? Is your presence healing? Are you involved in some kind of energy transference? Is your charisma, your dedication enlivening people? That's the specific kind of healing that Chiron is involved with. So we can look at the charts of energy healers, people that do hands-on healing, and see if Chiron is strong. Not so much other kinds of healing, but specifically that. That would make the connection with how what we found in the research is often manifested as healing, but not necessarily. So what we're saying is that Chiron is not always healing. But if you have a strong Chiron in certain vibrations with certain planets, the way that electric circuit works for you could be healing. So in certain vibrations with certain planets, Chiron can be inclined to energetic healing. Maybe. Let's look at it. Now, remember, what is it that we saw in the research in 2014? What we saw is Chiron in 11 vibration and overtones of 11, like 33, 66, and so on. Chiron, involved in strong planetary patterns, in 11 vibration, inclines to charisma in musical performance. Maybe Chiron in some other vibration comes out in a different way that could be hands-on healing. That's what we're going to see. We're going to see that the research that I did in the past few weeks suggests that that is true. So the same energetic process coming through different planets and different vibrations expresses differently, expresses in a different way. Now, number 2, can this process of Chiron be related to unresolved emotions during childhood? So when we say that Chiron is wounding, what kind of wound? Like you were playing a sport and you broke your arm? What kinds of wounds are we talking about here with Chiron? Isn't any kind of wounding? What Chiron specifically has to do with is emotional wounds from childhood for a specific reason. So what we're saying, according to our research, is that there is some truth to these ideas of what we've been seeing in charts, that Chiron is related to wounding and healing. It's a specific kind of healing. What kind of healing? Energetic healing. Chiron is related to wounding. What kind of wounding? The wounding that happens as you try to find your voice as a child. That's the wounding. It's a specific kind of wounding, and it's very pervasive. It happens to almost everyone to some extent, even if it's just a little bit. Why? Because finding your voice is so difficult. It's very, very difficult to find that thing that you were made for, that will be inspiring to you every day. Because you have a child, the child can't talk. The baby can't talk. It can't, then it grows up, and then you gradually try to find out how this baby functions. The parents have their priorities. The school system has their priorities. The child doesn't know. How do you find your voice? Usually there's a lot of stumbling, and sometimes it never even starts. Or you make several wrong steps. The fact is, there are certain things that work for certain people. That's what we know from astrology. So how do you find that? Well, astrology, especially this evidence-based astrology, is going to be one way. But in general, how? It's not been an easy process for a lot of people. So that's how Chiron is related to wounding. It's related to the wounding of the struggles, the barriers, the misunderstandings, the pressures that have made it difficult for me and for you to find our joy, to find our path that makes our hearts sing, to find our way to something that we get up every day and we feel enthusiastic about it. So everything that's prevented that from happening is going to be connected to Chiron. And everything that helped with that is going to be connected to Chiron. So finding our own voice is a difficult process. And you can think of it this way. What is supposed to happen in a family, and in particular with our parents? One way to think of it, you can say they protect us, they love us, they support us, and they also prepare us. And one of the greatest preparations can be to enable us to find our voice. So this dynamic between a child and their parents and their teachers and their neighborhoods and communities and the influence of the entire culture of the nation, to what extent does it facilitate a person, encourage a person, open doors, expose the child to these opportunities to find their voice? Invariably, there are pressures that work against what our best voice is, our best pursuit. Chiron is related to all of the things that helped you and enabled you to achieve those. But almost nobody gets a free ride, like 95% support to finding their voice. Historically, human beings throughout history and in different cultures have not been very good at that. We've classified people. Oh, you're male. Oh, you're female. Oh, you're from a rich family. Oh, you're from a poor family. You're from a family of artists, from a family of scientists, working class people. You're classified. You're categorized. You're put into boxes with certain expectations. How does this help you find your voice? It doesn't. This is the wounding. This is the wounding of Chiron. It's not that Chiron is this bad boy up in the sky who's making your life miserable. And, here's your wounds, like it's some kind of karmic debt, which is what a lot of people think. It's not a karmic debt. Why am I so confident about that? Because the research is very clear. The people who have Chiron, conjunct their sun and moon, are not as prone to problems and woundings as other groups of people that we've studied. That does not stand out. But the connection with the wounding is that what Chiron does invariably involves wounding, emotional wounding. What kind of wounding? The wounding that you don't feel supported. You weren't helped and guided to what you were made for. You were given a religion. You were given a role in life. You were given things to do. Well, society has to give you things to do. If it doesn't do that, that's not going to work either. So, but there can be more communication, listening, and attention, and hopefully some good guesses as to what kind of encouragement will work for you. How often do parents, teachers, etc. listen to the children, respect what they say? Not that they do what the child wants, but at least listen. Okay, so that's why Chiron is wounding, because of the difficult process of doing that. And what are the wounds about? Very specific. It's not any kind of wound. It's the wound that you feel that you were not encouraged, supported in finding what works for you. That's the wound. And again, it's not because Chiron wants to wound you. It's just because we human beings haven't been very good at parenting to the extent of not only protecting and providing for our children, which is really you might say number one. They're not protected and provided for. That's the worst. But once this physical and basic emotional context is there, the next step is to encourage their spirit, their soul, their intention, their purpose, their way of being. And that level has historically been very difficult. So that's why Chiron is connected to healing. What we do in vibrational astrology as an evidence-based practice, we try to take in all of the information, the results from the research, going through the databases, the working with clients, trying to figure out what are we saying, what are we doing, what's going on here, and come up with our best theory. This is our best theory. Do we know it's correct? No. It's what we have the greatest confidence in because it fits all of the information that we've gotten so far. Well, I'm already at a half hour. So let me wrap up this slide. Chiron is like the connective tissue that connects what is exciting, spontaneous, and free to our heart of hearts so we can dedicate ourselves to something important that we feel in our bones. You can feel the Saturn and Uranus. We want to dedicate ourselves to something that is important. It's important. Our contribution is important. It means something. And we can feel it in our bones. We were made for this. One can argue that our greatest responsibility in life is to provide the tools, environment, and encouragement to enable our children to find out what is in their hearts so that they will be excited and enthusiastic about their lives because they are doing something that they love and that is important. There's a strong Saturn quality to Chiron. In a way, you can say this is the most important thing, that we provide this support and this encouragement and this direction and listening and responding and working with the children so that they can find what is exciting to them. So the wounding can be very strong because the children, as they become adults, feeling hurt, carrying this burden, carrying these bad feelings about their childhood, the pain of it. The pain comes from asking this question, why? Why would nobody listen to me? Why were they not encouraging me? Why did my parents divorce? Don't they care about where I am going? So it's a profound question, and it's the demand of Chiron that we provide a way that children will leave the nest like a bird leaving the nest. They will become independent. They will become functional, independent, I mean, we're all interconnected, but you know what I mean by independent, able to contribute to society in their own unique way. It's got to be one of the most essential and important things in life. And that increases the wounding. Like, why is this not happening? There's something not right about it. Well, yeah, it's true. There's something not right about it. But I think one of the ways that Chiron, a person can proceed with Chiron is just, one thing is a little bit of detachment about it. This is what happened. This is fairly universal to some of us more than others. And it's all relative. So we have to be grateful for what we did get and just realize we don't understand everything and just move forward with where you are. So we're not going to get solutions by going over and over what went wrong. Well, that's easier said than done. But anyway, that's the basic idea. We need to move forward at whatever age or whatever situation we're in with finding our voice, finding out what's inspiring. You might find it when you're 60 years old, or, find it to a greater extent. So the process of Chiron never ends. So the family is the cauldron in which this dynamic works out. The dynamic of finding your voice. It's in that family situation. And that's where all this pressure of Chiron comes and why there's so much wounding attached to it. It doesn't have to be wounding. Some people grow up in a family, they get the support, it works, the parents and others see the talent or direction or motivation of the child, they do what they can. So many people, when they're successful, they thank their parents and other people, their teachers. Chiron worked well. That's Chiron working well. But it's so important, the function of Chiron, this connective tissue. It's like the connective tissue in our bodies. It's like Saturn is like the bones, and Uranus is the enthusiasm. Without those ligaments, without those tendons, without that connective tissue, the bones don't work. We can't jump around and dance. So that's Chiron. It's enabling things to happen. So family is a cauldron in which the dynamic works out. Chiron is a saint or a sinner. Chiron tends to come out in our lives extremely well or extremely badly because this is so important. And more often, you might say the sinner, because children are, because more often few children are given the highest priority. They're not always carefully listened to. They're not often carefully guided. Sometimes they're forced. Oh, we want you to do this. And they're not often given inspiring opportunities for many, many reasons. Parents have to work. There's not a lot of time, or they don't have the imagination for various reasons. So there we go. We're at almost 40, 38 minutes or something. We will continue with this slide in part 2 in this series on our latest research and discoveries and understanding of Chiron. Thank you very much for listening, my friends. God bless. Namaste.